Hi everyone. Our discussion this time will focus on writing an abstract for your research paper. Without saying that much, let's start. The contents of our discussion are as follows. First, definition of an abstract. Second, how and when to write an abstract. Third, rules for writing an abstract. Fourth, analyzing the parts of an abstract. Fifth, four key elements of an abstract. And sixth, tips for writing an abstract. First and foremost, let's define what is an abstract. An abstract is a short summary of a longer work, such as a dissertation or research paper. Basically, guys, the abstract is the gist or the summary of your paper. The abstract concisely reports the aims and outcomes of your research so that the readers know exactly what the paper is about. So take note that only the highlights or main points should be summarized on your abstract. We will go into details later on. So the question is, how do we write the abstract of our research paper? Writing the abstract should be done at the very end, when you have completed the rest of your paper. Again, the abstract writing should be done when the study is already implemented or conducted. Because, as I said earlier, in layman's term, the abstract is just the summary or the gist of your paper. There are four things you need to include. First, your research problem and objectives. Second, your methods. Third, your key results or arguments. And fourth, your conclusion. Here are some rules that you should bear in mind in writing your abstract. An abstract is usually around 150 to 300 words, but there's often a strict word limit. So make sure to check the requirements of your university or college because it depends on the instruction of your professor or your teacher. In a dissertation or thesis, include the abstract on a separate page after the title page and acknowledgments, but before the table of contents. Here is a concrete example of an abstract. And please take note of its details because later on, we're going to analyze its content. So allow me to read. UK environmental organizations currently face a significant funding gap. It is well established that representations of individual victims are more effective than the abstract concepts like climate change when designing fundraising campaigns. This study aims to determine how such representations can be better targeted in order to increase donations. Specifically, it investigates whether the perceived social distance between the victims and potential donors has an impact on donation intention. In this context, social distance is defined as the extent to which people feel they are in the same social group, in group, or another social group, out group, in relation to climate change victims. To test the hypothesis that smaller social distance leads to higher donation intention, an online survey was distributed to potential donors across the UK. Respondents were randomly divided into two conditions, large and small social distance, and asked to respond to one of two sets of fundraising material. Responses were analyzed using a two sample t test. The results showed a small effect in the opposite direction than hypothesized. Large social distance was associated with higher donation intention than small social distance. These results suggest that potential donors are more likely to respond to campaigns depicting victims that they perceive as socially distant from themselves. On this basis, The concept of social distance should be taken into account when designing environmental fundraising campaigns. As you can see, the abstract consists of 220 words. This time, let's examine the given example. Let us now analyze the contents of our abstract. As you can see, the first sentence in our abstract represents the problem of your paper, or the gap. The problem means the first sentence establishes the topic and main problem that the research addresses. Here, be straightforward. Huwag magpaligoy-ligoy. Be concise as possible. While the next sentence represents the background of your study. The background is a brief summary of the scholarly context to show the study's relevance. This is the existing studies. Ito yung mga researches na connected sa kinakandak mong study. The third sentence clearly states the specific objective of your research. Next, if your abstract uses specialized terms that would be unfamiliar to the average academic reader or that have various different meanings, give a concise definition. In here, nagbibigay tayo ng short and concise definition dun sa mga terms na ginamit natin sa study kasi baka iba yung maging pagpapakahulugan ng ibang readers na makakabasa sa ating study. Well, in this part, it is called hypothesis. The study's hypothesis is clearly stated. When you say hypothesis, it is a statement of expectation or prediction that will be tested by your research. Before formulating your research hypothesis, read about the topic of interest to you. Next, we have the methods. This next step is a brief description of the methods you used or utilized. When you say methods, these are the strategies, the processes, or the techniques utilized in the collection of your data or evidence for analysis in order to uncover new information or create better understanding of your topic. Next, we have the results. The most relevant results are summarized. Again, magiging wordy siya or magkakaroon ng verbosity kapag hindi mo sinummarize yung nasa paper ninyo. So, but you need to summarize the findings of your study based upon the information gathered as a result of the methodology or methodologies you applied. Finally, the conclusion. The study's main conclusions are concisely stated. Remember, because this is just part of the abstract where you can comply with the maximum or rather minimum amount of words by your school. Showing how the results answer the study's objective. As this research focused on a practical problem, it also includes recommendations. But in your main paper where you mention in details the conclusion intends to help your reader understand why your research should matter to them after they have finished reading it. A conclusion is not merely a summary of your points or a restatement, but a synthesis of key points. This time, let's answer the question when to write an abstract. Number one, you will always have to include an abstract when writing a thesis, dissertation, research paper, or submitting an article to an academic journal. In all cases, the abstract is the very last thing you write. It should be a completely independent, self-contained text, not an excerpt copied from your paper or dissertation. Remember that, guys. Hindi po siya copy word by word. An abstract should be fully understandable on its own to someone who hasn't read your full paper or related sources. And the third and last, when to write an abstract. The easiest approach to writing an abstract is to imitate the structure of the larger work. Think of it as a miniature version of your dissertation. Para siyang mini study. Para ka lang nag-storytelling pero in a summarized way or research of your research paper. In most cases, this means the abstract should contain four key elements. In here, let's discuss the aims, and I guess this include the tips on how to write your abstract. First, start by clearly defining the purpose of your research. What practical or theoretical problem does the research respond to? Or what research question did you aim to answer? So, guys, meaning this part will answer the gap that your paper wants to address. Next, you can include some brief context on the social or academic relevance of your topic, but don't go into detailed background information. After identifying the problem, state the objective of your research. Use verbs like investigate, test, analyze, or evaluate to describe exactly what you set out to do. This part of the abstract can be written in the present or past simple tense, but should never refer to the future as the research is already completed. This time, let's analyze some practical examples on how to write an abstract. First example, this study will investigate the relationship between coffee consumption and productivity. This example is incorrect. As you can see, the verb form is in the future tense. But this is the correct way, guys. This study investigates the relationship between coffee consumption and productivity since it is expressed in present tense. And here is a tip on how to write the methods of your abstract. Indicate the research methods that you use to answer your question. This part should be a straightforward description of what you did in one or two sentences. It is usually written in the past tense as it refers to completed actions. And here is an example on how to write the methods of your abstract. Example, structured interviews will be conducted with 25 participants. This is an incorrect example because the tense of the verb is in the future tense. Here, the method should be expressed in past tense since it is a completed action. Structured interviews were conducted with 25 participants. Take note, guys, in writing your abstract, don't evaluate the validity or obstacles here. The goal is not to give an account of the methodology's strengths and weaknesses. Hindi mo kailangan i-justify na bakit yun yung ginawa mo kasi isa pa, hahaba yung magiging wordy, magkakaroon ng verbosity kapag ginustify mo yung mga nagamit yung methodology in conducting your research. This is to give the reader a quick insight into the overall approach and procedures you utilized. Next, a tip in writing the results of your abstract. Summarize the main research results. This part of the abstract can be in the present or past simple tense. Here's an example on how to write the results of your abstract. The first one is incorrect, while the two others are considered correct. Let's read the incorrect one. Our analysis has shown a strong correlation between coffee consumption and productivity. The other two are considered correct. Our analysis shows a strong correlation between coffee consumption and productivity. And our analysis showed a strong correlation between coffee consumption and productivity. The first one is incorrect because the verb form is in present perfect tense. When you say present perfect tense, it It is an action that started in the past and continues in the present. Kaya mali siya. While the other two are written in just simple present and then simple past. I think this part is self explanatory. Depending on how long and complex your research is, you may not be able to include all results here. Again, magiging verbose siya. Magkakaroon ng verbosity or wordy. Try to highlight only the most important findings that will allow the reader to understand your conclusions. In the conclusion, state the main conclusions of your research. What is your answer to the problem or question? The reader should finish with a clear understanding of the central point that your research has proved or argued. Conclusions are usually written in the present simple tense. Here is an example how to write the conclusion of your paper as part of your abstract. As you can see, the first one is considered incorrect and the second one is considered correct. Let me read. We concluded that coffee consumption increases productivity. In this part, this is considered incorrect because the verb form is in the past tense. You should write it in the simple present because there might be some misconception sa pag-write mo ng iyong conclusion kasi parang ibig niyang sabihin may mga existing studies na nakapareho ng ginagawa nyo. So, why bother to conduct a similar study na nagkapareho lang ng conclusion sa mga existing studies? Another tip, if your paper will be published, you might have to add a list of keywords at the end of the abstract. This keyword should reference the most important elements of the research to help potential readers find your paper during their own literature searches. Be aware that some publications manuals such as APA style have specific formatting requirements for these keywords. Ultimately, not all abstract will contain precisely the same elements. If your research has different structure, for example, a humanities dissertation that builds an argument through thematic chapters, you can write your abstract through a process of reverse outlining. For each chapter or section, list keywords and draft 1 to 2 sentences that summarize the central point or argument. This will give you a framework of your abstract structure. Next, revise the sentences to make connections and show how the argument develops. Once again, the abstract should tell a condensed version of the whole story or your entire paper, and it should only include information that can be found in the main text. Reread your abstract to make sure it gives a clear summary of your overall argument. Remember, if you're writing a thesis or dissertation or submitting to a journal, there are often specific formatting requirements for a certain abstract. Make sure to check the guidelines and format of your paper. For APA research paper, you can follow the APA abstract format. Always stick to the word limit. Remember, guys, if you have not been given any guidelines on the length of the abstract, write no more than one double spaced page. Here are some of the checklists for you to be fully guided on how to properly write your abstract. The word count is within the required length or a maximum of one A4 sheet of paper. Next, the abstract is included after the title page and or acknowledgments and before the table of contents. Next, the objective, problem statement, and or research questions are stated. Another, the methodology is briefly described. The most important results are summarized, and the main conclusions are stated. Next, any recommendations and or suggestions for further research are mentioned. And finally, the abstract can be understood by someone without prior knowledge of the topic. In conclusion, I would like to share a tip coming from Shona McCombs. on how to write your abstract. An original paper doesn't only quote, paraphrase, and summarize other sources, but also adds your own analysis, ideas, or data. That means it's not so much about the percentage of your paper that uses other sources. It's more about how you use them. For example, you might combine different sources in a new way to make your own argument about the topic. Evaluate which sources provide the most convincing conclusions, or build on previous research by collecting original data. The best way to start is by identifying a specific research problem and focus on how your sources can help you address that problem. Thank you guys for watching. God bless.